Hey everybody, how's it going?
Hi
Brody
guys.
here. Rachel is with me, and
Hello.
for the first time ever guesting on this series.
Yep.
Welcome back. This is my Let's Get Real series. For those of you who don't know, this may be your first video you see. This is just a series where I talk about more serious topics. I talk about things that are going on in my life and around the world and all that stuff. All that fun, good, serious stuff. So
They've been good. It's been a good series.
we're gonna try not to be too serious, but at the same time, I like a good discussion. So, if anybody hasn't seen my last Let's Get Real episode, I was talking about confidence, and I was talking about how confidence really kind of makes the difference in how you kind of view yourself, and basically it kind of dictates a little bit, anyway, how you go through life and your outlook on life and all of that. So today, as you guys can see by the title, what I want to talk about is the power of positivity and negativity a little bit, but I mostly want to focus on positivity.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who don't know, Rachel, of course, if first time ever watching, she's my wife. She's also a counselor, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So I don't know if you want to say specifically what your credentials are, because I don't want to get it wrong.
Well, I'm a mental health counselor
Yeah.
in New York State, and then in Ontario, Canada, I'm a registered psychotherapist.
Yeah. So she's got them qualifications.
Yeah.
So basically, I brought kind of Rachel on here because I had some stuff I wanted to say, and I basically am going to give you guys my perspective as somebody who is not qualified by any means to, really, I guess, really give advice properly, what professional advice
Well,
and all
you're
that.
able to talk about your own
But I
personal
want to talk about
experiences,
my
yeah.
own personal experiences, yeah, and I want to talk about my outlook and what I've just kind of learned about things. And she's just going to kind of make sense of my gobbledygook.
We can also talk about some of the things I feel like we've done regarding, cultivating positivity in our own lives.
So I guess what I'll first discuss is just like what my experience with positivity, and my thing is, and I've talked a little about this in my Be Confident video, is that I kind of always sort of struggled with self-confidence, and I've always kind of been more of a negative person. I think especially in my early 20s, by the time I kind of really hit adulthood. Though I guess you could argue, I would argue that I didn't really hit adulthood until the last maybe 2 years or something.
I kind of feel the same way, so
yeah.
it's
well,
all right.
What is it? The brain stops developing at like what, 20?
Mid-20s or something
25,
like that, yeah.
something like that. So it makes sense. But anyway, I think for me, that I had many times in my 20s where I was in a very dark place, felt very negative, very cynical about the world, all of those things, and I think everybody deals with that at some point in their life or to some degree or whatever, to varying degrees. And I think one of my biggest problems, aside from having kind of a lack of self-confidence, I think it was a lot of negativity, and I think that honestly fed into a lot of my self-confidence issues. And I realize nowadays, especially once I kind of became more aware of mental health and what like things like depression and anxiety are, and this whole idea of like, as I talked about, self-concept and things like that, I think I realized more and more that even just the language that I was using and the negative outlook I would have on life and on situations didn't help my situation very much. Especially in, I'm sure everybody gets in those moods where they're just in a dark place and everything sucks and everything's horrible, the world sucks, you hate everybody, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you don't hate everybody, but you hate yourself more than anything. And I think a lot of negative self-talk, and I think a lot of just always viewing things from that kind of bad perspective.
Glass half empty.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, glass half empty versus half full. It's these things are cliche, and people talk about these things all the time, but they are, I think, for a reason. And I think a lot of this stuff really affected me badly. And it wasn't until I really started making a conscious effort to think more positively about things that I think I actually started to have a better outlook on life. That's not thank you. That's not to say that that everything is always sunshine and roses. By no means is that true. I mean, in fact, there's plenty of times in recent days I could tell you that I've struggled with things, and I still struggle with a little bit of negative self-talk and things like that. But I think overall, actually making a conscious effort to to actually being positive and trying to look at things in a more positive light, I think it's really good. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and add to that.
I guess what I feel like maybe is a valuable idea from doing a video like this is that there are some people who are blessed with just having a positive outlook naturally, and I feel like that was definitely not me, and not you. Yeah. But I feel like the kind of the lesson that you were talking about is that that's something that can be consciously cultivated, and if you have a tendency towards negative thinking, you can do things to shift that over time, and a lot of therapy focuses on that. And remember in my last video, I don't know if anyone saw in the comments, I wrote this elaborate response to your last Let's Get Real, and in it I was talking about I think I was talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, and that like pretty much just is not necessarily cultivating positivity always, but it's about shifting negative, unrealistic beliefs and things that people don't even realize are unrealistic. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the more you do that kind of stuff, the more natural, like more realistic or more positive thinking becomes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we've even, as we discussed last night, and we kind of touched on here for a second, her and I have even actively and regularly engaged in more positive discussion. We call it practicing positivity. Yeah. And like sometimes when one of us or both of us are feeling negative, sometimes it's really difficult to be honest when you're in certain moods. Yeah. But like we'll sit down and we'll be like, hey, should we practice positivity? Sure. So then we'll just like go along and we'll like list a bunch of things that are going well and like just try to sometimes it really helps, I think.
I feel like it is very effective, and sometimes I agree. When I'm in a really bad mood, I'm really reluctant to do it, but that's like kind of when you need it the most.
Yeah, there's sometimes one of us will be like, let's practice positivity. The other person's like, no, I'm not. No, screw that.
But it is really helpful. And,
it is, yeah.
I think it's important to look at the other side, and it's so easy to see the negative, but like I said, there's a lot of counseling that focuses around that, like looking at what the strengths are that you have and looking at consciously trying to kind of like debate a thought that you have, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's something that I find myself doing more and more, is just kind of, or at the very least just trying to see the positive aspect of the situation, even if it's a really terrible situation. I feel like I am pretty good at finding the positive side of things these days, although sometimes admittedly it is difficult because sometimes something is so terrible that it's really hard. Even if you can find the positive thing, the terrible thing is so terrible that it does overwhelm you, and it makes it really difficult to do that. And I actually feel like, and maybe you could put some sense in this, I feel like for me, sometimes in the moment, like when I'm feeling badly, trying to be positive and looking at the positive aspect of it doesn't help in that instant, but I think maybe later it actually does help. I don't know if there's some kind of subconscious thing that is happening, but I don't know if
well, I think it's impossible to be positive all the time. It's just unrealistic. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with having exceptionally negative experiences that you can't be positive about, but I think the point is like to try to cultivate a different way of thinking overall, so that you don't spiral into like really negative or stuck mindsets, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And I think taking a foot forward, and here's the thing, guys, I don't think this is, for me, certainly it wasn't easy to do. It still isn't easy to do. I still struggle with it. I think really, like, if you want to see a difference, you have to make a very conscious effort to do it. And it's not just there. Unfortunately, I'm sure you will back me up on this one. There isn't just some kind of like miracle, like thing that's going to happen that all of a sudden everything's going to be great and everything's going to be sunshine and roses, and you're going to be, you're going to be positive all the time, happy all the time. That just doesn't exist. But at the same time, you can significantly improve your outlook on life if you really make a conscious step forward. And I think another big aspect of that is surrounding yourself, or at least associating with at least a handful or even one person who's going to give you positive affirmation as well. I think that's important, don't you?
Definitely, yes. Yep. One thing I wanted to go back to about, like, I forget what you said that sparked this, but I remember I wanted to talk with you in this video about the whole neuroplasticity idea, and we did talk about that before. And that's the whole idea that, like, your brain changes in response to what your experiences are, and the more you experience certain things, the more certain parts of your brain get used. And it's kind of like your brain can develop skills, just like, you know what I mean? It's like learning a skill.
It's like a muscle. It's kind of like if you're it'd be like if you were working out. Eventually, you can you work your arms out enough, they're going to start building and getting stronger. So same kind of concept,
yeah,
right?
That's the kind of idea. Like, I'm certainly not a brain expert, so like forgive me anyone who's watching this that is, but that's kind of the idea of it. It's like the more you are doing that, the more certain pathways in your brain are strengthening, and it's like practicing positive thinking is kind of like developing a skill. It's not something that just happens overnight, but something that takes a lot of effort, but becomes easier over time, like meditating or like playing the piano or something
like anything else. Yeah. The more you do something, the more well versed you become in it, and it makes sense that you would just be exercise. I would think of it as exercising a muscle that is you wouldn't have normally exercised.
Right, and I totally agree with you that how much positivity you're getting from around you, like in the form of other people or other kind of validation, makes a big difference too, right? And limiting the amount of negative feedback you get from other people or other things in life certainly helps. Like, it helps the way you think about yourself.
I have a question for you. Is there any evidence to suggest, and maybe you don't know, I'm sure you probably don't know the nitty-gritty science about it, but is there any evidence to suggest that doing that can like chemically alter like certain things in your brain? Like, for example, people who struggle with depression, I know that can actually be like some kind of chemical imbalance in the brain, right? Is there evidence to suggest that it could at least affect it at all or change it at all?
What could?
Just like the idea of what you're saying, like neuroplasticity of like, practicing the same thing over and over.
Well,
of changing an outlook on life.
I haven't.
I'm just curious about it. I wasn't sure.
Well, one of the things I was going to mention in the video was in this video was like that there's a whole study about positivity, which is called positive psychology, and like how humans cultivate positivity, blah blah blah. Again, I'm not going to give a great definition because that's not my area of expertise or anything. Yeah. But I mean, there is a whole study on it, so like I'm sure somewhere there's research on that, but I don't really know. Like,
okay.
Neuroplasticity is like a real thing. So you would only assume logically that this, like if you're practicing this too, that also would affect your brain. Like, it just kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I haven't read extendedly about it, but
yeah. So don't take it.
Yeah.
But
it just kind of makes sense, and even if you're not even looking at your brain, I think like just the more you do anything, the more of a natural you become.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, and I also feel for myself that it really has improved tremendously. I mean, once I made a conscious effort. I don't mind telling you guys, this is Let's Get Real. I mean, there were times I've definitely struggled, and maybe I will. This will be a different video, but I've definitely struggled with some pretty terrible depression. I have struggled with, and you'd probably back me up on this, is just like with having some of the lowest confidence, just really bad confidence. I know maybe it might not seem that way to some of you guys who watch my videos all the time, but certainly it's been a struggle my whole life, and I think that. Once I started realizing, and maybe this is the other thing we should talk about a little bit, is just like your perception of yourself a little bit, and the idea of like, you may have all of these weird kind of negative impressions of yourself that just aren't true. That's a really important thing to do, is try to, and it's hard when it's I feel like we just have this natural tendency as humans to be very tough on ourselves, tougher on our, at least for me anyway, tougher on myself than anybody else.
I think that's true.
Even my worst, even on my worst enemy, which I can't think of a single enemy, but you know what I'm saying. Like, even on my worst enemy, I think I'm tougher than myself.
I think that's really typical. Yeah.
I think it's very, very typical of people, and I think that kind of trying to step back and look objectively and going, okay, really, am I that bad? Like, I mean, there's like, sure, I could improve here. Everybody can improve on, even experts in their craft can continue to improve on their craft, and continually comparing yourself to others is also not a good idea. We kind of live in a weird society where we sort of, especially with the internet, especially YouTube and stuff, and it's existed in media and stuff, and in magazines and in Hollywood and all that stuff. We kind of are exposed to a lot of things that can kind of warp our own self-image a little bit.
Definitely. That
we think we need to look like this person, or we need to be smart like this person, or, oh, this person is so much more successful than me, or oh, this person is so much more confident than me, and or smarter than me, or whatever it is. We need to realize that these people are like exceptions to the rule, rather than like how, most people are, or I guess
it's not realistic.
Yeah, it's not. Thank you. It's not realistic. Yeah, it's. So the point is that you should never really compare yourself to others. You should always kind of self-assess if you can. I think in an objective way.
Right. Well,
and objectivity's hard too.
Of course, I was gonna say it's really hard to do, but I think like, as far as practicing positivity, that's something you could try to consciously cultivate towards yourself, like practicing being kinder to yourself and practicing regularly looking for the good things that maybe you don't see about yourself. And, for people who struggle with low self-esteem, sometimes I suggest this exercise called Be Your Own Best Friend, where you're looking at yourself as somebody else would look at you. And, like, what would you say to yourself? And I feel like that's a good way to try to shift the way you think and talk to yourself, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because nobody else would talk to you the way you talk to yourself, so...
Yeah. And the idea of, again, I would imagine, having at least one person or a few people who can give you positive affirmations would also help in that. Because then you're not just getting positive affirmations from yourself, but from other people. And to me, when somebody tells me, I'll tell you a quick story. And I actually did this as an exercise for my communications class recently. And so there's kind of a difference in... for example, my last job before the job I'm working, my boss was fantastic. He was a lovely guy, probably the best boss I ever had. He always gave me positive affirmations, like, hey man, you're doing a great job, keep it up, and that made me feel so confident and so competent in my job.
That's
and
good.
It made my job, I wasn't in love with the job, but I didn't mind coming to work every day because my boss was always like, how's it going? You did a really good job on that last night. Every single day.
I feel like that's what boss should be.
I would get positive affirmation, and it made me work harder. It made me care more. It made me really, especially for him, whenever he said something, it was done, Whereas now, when I first started my job, it was weird because everybody's cool now and everything, and no judgment to anybody in my job now, but always when you start out doing something like a new job, there's always training and stuff like that. And there was a lot of stuff that I had done at my previous job that I was like, oh yeah, I know how to do it. But then like, because I wasn't doing it the same way as I did in the last job, I kind of had to relearn things, and that kind of kicked my confidence level down a bit, and I kind of was a bit negative about it. So I think that, long story short, that positive affirmation from somebody else can be hugely beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or also like it's something certainly worth cultivating in yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that if it's not coming from the outside, you can feel that way anyway, you know what I mean?
And see, in that example, had my inward confidence or positive I guess in this case it would be like confidence in what I do was a little better than maybe not having that positive affirmation in my new job wouldn't have affected me as much as it did, because it kind of made me feel a little self-conscious and stuff like that, So does that make sense? Yeah. So but yeah, I would say that that a lot of those. Do you have any suggestions for any other strategies you think?
Well, like I said, I would really suggest the whole be your own best friend exercise. There's a lot of things, like, again, also making positivity lists, or I suggest to a lot of people they practice a daily practice of gratitude where you acknowledge the good things, the things you're grateful for that you may not see, and those can be really little things, like, they can be huge things or just like tiny things, like what a great cup of tea that was, like trying to notice things that you don't normally notice, and that kind of stuff can really shift your focus. And then another thing is this is really topical because I'm doing a training on dialectical behavior therapy right now, which we don't really have to get into what that is.
Go ahead, just give us a brief.
Well, it's just like, it's a type of therapy that was designed for people with borderline personality disorder. And so there's a whole bunch, it's really skills focused, and there's a whole bunch of different components, like different types of skills they're teaching. And one of the ones that I recently was learning about is really relevant, so I wrote it down, so I'll just actually like read it out. So yeah, one of them is called building positive experiences, and they have 3 different suggestions to do that. So the first one is notice the positive, so that's kind of like the practicing gratitude thing. Every day, making a point of noticing what's around you that's positive. And then 2, cultivating positive experiences, so like creating something joyful or enjoyable every single day. And then 3, connect with a sense of meaning and like what makes life worth living. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's one of the skills in DBT, and I feel like that if people do that all the time, that could have a very real positive effect.
The last one, can you read again? What exactly was the last one again?
It was connecting with a sense of meaning in your life and touching base with yourself with what makes your life worth living.
I think that's really important.
Definitely.
I think that's extremely important.
Definitely.
I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, for sure, existentially. And, I feel like there's a lot of things that you could... I feel like even something for me, what is my meaning? Like when I look at like meaning, there just be the best person that I can be, and for me it's just being the best person means being kind to others, being kind to myself, and just trying to convey a more positive outlook and positive and happy life, so
Good. Yeah, I think touching base with what a sense of meaning is in life for you makes an enormous difference and can help people get through very difficult things.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like it just makes people more resilient because you have some purpose for why you're doing things. You're not just randomly like suffering through tedious stuff or lousy stuff in life. There's like some kind of, you're going somewhere.
Yeah, like it's kind of like the whole thing of like setting goals too. It goes along with that, and kind of building yourself up in that way. I did want to mention too quickly that I think both of us understand that like there are some people who really, really struggle with a lot of self-confidence and really struggle with like mental health problems and stuff. And if you find that like even trying to do any of this stuff is really insurmountable, go see a counselor.
I absolutely agree, and I think like sometimes when people are suffering from serious mental illnesses, exercises like that maybe are helpful to a certain extent, but you might need more, you know what I mean? You might need like the help of a professional counselor, or I'm really not a big advocate for medication, but I think it's helpful in certain circumstances with people with certain mental illnesses, so like sometimes that really can make a big difference too. So it really depends on what people are dealing with. But I think for the average person, some of those, the exercises we talked about and the whole just general idea of trying to be more positive is important. So.
Yeah, I think it really is. And it is a struggle. Like, I would go into it looking at it like anything else. Like, it's a challenge that you're going to try to basically work on every day. And you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. But I think overall, the more consistent you are with it, the better you're going to feel. Okay,
so I think a lot of people are worried that practicing positivity really like doesn't make a difference or could be counterproductive. Like, the kinder I am to myself, the less I'm going to want to strive to be better. And I need to be hard on myself to like be working hard. But really there's evidence that like being kinder to yourself can have positive effects. Like, there's studies done with athletes and those who use positive visualizations before they, go out and play, visualizations of them doing really well and succeeding. Apparently studies, I've never read studies, but I've heard that apparently they actually show that they perform better. So
I read this in my communications book, funny enough.
That was in your communications
book?
Yeah, it
was. So I think there's some like loose counseling in that, but anyway.
Oh, there's definitely a lot of counseling elements in that book. But I find those studies really interesting because it shows that like, contrary to that belief that I can't be nice to myself, or like the things I tell myself make no difference about how, as far as how I perform in the world, that's really not true. And that the things you tell yourself really do make a big difference. You know what I mean?
Can I also give a little bit my perspective is slightly different on this too, just from what I've personally experienced, is that rather than being like too hard on myself to like, I gotta get this done, I gotta be, I need to better myself and stuff. Mine actually, I think, came from trying to be as humble and be having a lot of humility, because I believe in that. And I think there's also a lot of other people who are kind of like that, who want to be nice people and who want to be kind and want to be courteous and want to not be arrogant and all those things. I've always been like that, but way too far on the other side. You can't like, it's okay, it's good to, I think that's, if anybody is actually like that, like I personally think it's a great attribute to have. But don't go too far with it where it's like you're lowering yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, I don't think
you don't want to be too humble. You want to have a little bit of confidence in yourself.
Right. Well, I don't think being humble means being hard on yourself, and I don't think being
Yeah.
positive about yourself means being arrogant.
Yeah.
I feel like being positive about yourself is just acknowledging more good and being kinder to yourself, but it doesn't mean that you're not accountable for your actions. And,
exactly.
You know what I mean? So
that was always kind of my big mistake, was trying too hard to be like a humble person and whatever. And it got to the point where I was kind of doing myself a disservice because I was being hard on myself, way too hard on myself.
And then that's just you limiting yourself.
Right. It doesn't really help you at all. It actually hinders you a lot. So
there's a book I want to show. Can we take a little pause? Not that one.
Okay.
So anyway, there is a book I wanted to recommend that I've been reading and I find really helpful, and it's about it's kind of on this topic. It's called the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. So this is what it looks like, everybody. Mm-hmm. So I haven't finished it, but so far it's really good. And what it is about is practicing positivity, towards yourself, really. Also being more mindful, which is a different topic, but also valuable. Being more, like, in the present moment and stuff. So anyway, if anyone's interested, it's good so far, so I recommend it.
And we don't get any kind of sponsors for this because I am a small channel and nobody cares about me.
I just like it. That's why I suggested
that's
it.
Why I suggested
and if I feel like it'd be helpful in this video if we, make a couple of suggestions or things that people can kind of try. So
that's a great idea. Yeah. I want to move on to the other half of this video, and that is the power of negativity as well. Mm-hmm. Now, I think we've already talked a lot about the power of negativity in the sense of how much it can kind of have a grip on somebody's concept of themselves and how they look at the world.
But what do you mean the power of negativity?
But I think negativity does have a little bit of value, personally. And I don't think negativity really has any value in terms of, like, being hard on yourself and being, talking yourself down and all of these things that we were discussing. But I think negativity does keep a person grounded a little bit.
Or maybe negativity is the wrong word. Maybe what we really mean is
realistic.
Sometimes realism, or being realistic, and sometimes being realistic is acknowledging that certain things are negative.
Now, I need to preface this too with something that my psychology professor said to me in school. Like when I first originally tried to go back 2 years ago. Because I asked him, because we were talking about positivity and negativity, and I was like, well, what about, like, just being realistic? And he said, that's negativity. That's a form of negativity, which I kind of disagree with that, but let's take that premise and let's say he's right that it's a form of negativity. Mm-hmm. Then if being realistic is negativity, then I think it has its place sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that idea.
I don't think I agree with it either, but let's just for the sake of argument, use that.
And how does he even know that? Because what's positive and negative is so often subjective. But anyway, whatever. Let's just accept that premise. Yeah, we're going to
go down the rabbit hole. Let's accept the premise as flawed as it is. Okay. So in that sense, I think negativity has a place in terms of being grounded. And we have a great example. Yes.
If you want a good laugh, you can read this book. We're not actually recommending that as a serious suggestion.
No, this is just for a laugh. Okay, so let's see if I can pull something out. Okay.
So basically, while you're looking for an example, I'll explain what the book is and what the whole idea is. So this lady, Louise Hay, I recently somebody lent me this book, and what she does is she's all about positive affirmations, which is really, like, relevant. I think positive affirmations are really great, saying good things like, I am a valuable person, like, saying good things to yourself or about the world can shape your view, as we were talking about. However, this lady takes it to a ludicrous delusional degree to the point where I feel like it shows how it can be harmful because it can make you naive, it can make you overlook very real things. So, did you find an example?
I think I don't know, she says something like, all disease comes from a state of unforgiveness.
There was one, it was so funny in this book. I forget exactly what she said, but the gist of it is that, like, she's talking about different illnesses in the body and how, like, you can use positive affirmations to heal those things. And, like, cancer comes from a lack of acceptance or forgiveness from childhood trauma or something like that. And it's like, in that case, you can't just use positive affirmations to address cancer. Some people might say you can, but I feel like that's kind of ludicrous. And this is a situation where it's being positive to the point of lunacy,
Okay. So like, let's use this as an example. This is a little insane. Usually, asthmatic children will outgrow their disease. This really means they go away to school, get married, or leave home somehow, and the disease dissolves. Oftentimes later in life, an experience will happen that pushes an old button within them, and they have another attack.
Oh my god, read this one.
Okay.
Cancer one.
Cancer is a disease caused by deep resentment held for a long time until it literally eats away at the body. Something happens in childhood that destroys the sense of trust. This experience is never forgotten, and the individual lives with a sense of self-pity, finding it hard to develop and maintain long-term meaningful relationships. Because of that belief system, life seems to be a series of disappointments. A feeling of hopelessness and helplessness and loss permeates the thinking, and it becomes easy to blame others for all of our problems. People with cancer are also very self-critical. To me, learning to love and accept the self is the key to healing cancers.
Oh my god. Okay,
all right, so
we both have too much to say.
Go ahead.
So,
it's insane.
I mean, this is one of those examples. Okay, this lady, by the way, had cancer and claims that she healed it from changing her life and her attitude.
Yeah.
Which, okay, whatever. Who knows what really happened, but this is one of those situations where, like, being delusionally positive and trying to use positive affirmations and thoughts to heal real physical illnesses is dangerous.
Yeah, it is.
And it's like, yes, a positive attitude can help when undergoing cancer treatment. I think there might be some evidence of that. I'm not sure, but like it makes sense because if you're more positive, there's like if you're experiencing like huge negativity, maybe your body's really stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's just ridiculous.
But positive, if you go too far, basically, I think what we're basically trying to sum up is that if you go too far in that direction, where everything is positive, it can lead to delusional thinking.
Yeah, which is not helpful.
Yeah, and I personally think that being grounded in reality is important. And I personally want to just say that, like, I'm a really big fan of objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
I like, I mean, it is very difficult to be objective all of the time. But in order to be objective, you have to look at the negative aspects of things and say, okay, well, how much of this situation is the negativity? Is this situation being affected by negativity that is unfounded, or is this just a negative situation and I need to realize that, hey, this situation is not a good situation? But then maybe how you assess the problem, or how you assess the situation, or how you go to addressing the problem of the situation, you can use positivity.
Agreed. Yes.
So it's just basically like that's, I think, the main point of the power of negativity.
Right. Yeah. I don't think ignoring negative things makes your life better. I think it's sometimes things suck and it's just a fact, and either like you can acknowledge negative things and have compassion for yourself or for the situation, or you can try to change the situation. You know what I mean? Like, what if you have to acknowledge what's real, and then you can try to shift your attitude about it or shift what the situation is, but like ignoring it does not help anybody.
I think it's really shitty sometimes, some of the situations people go through, some of the things that go on in the world. Sometimes the world can be a dark place. Sometimes there's reason for people to feel cynical and things, but I think the first step is definitely acknowledging those things, processing them, and then trying to work towards a more positive outcome. That's
pretty much
to be really important, and just having, but instead of looking at a situation, be like, oh, that's fine, it's all good, it's fine. You're gonna cure your cancer. You're gonna cure your cancer if you will it. It's like this lady. Don't buy this book. If you find it, burn it, or just make it'd be good for comedy.
She also did a CD of affirmations. Oh, it was so funny. It was so funny. I should let you listen to that before I give it back to that person.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I guess we're going off on a tangent here.
Yeah,
so I
sorry.
guess we could. No, it's okay. I guess it'd be a good time to end it. I hope you guys find this video helpful at all. I hope my my personal experiences mixed with some of her, I guess you'd say, professional training and study, made for a good video, at least somewhat entertaining. So
I hope it was helpful.
I hope it was helpful too, and I want to thank you, of course, for coming on.
My pleasure.
To the
I thought you were gonna
to the video, my love.
Of course, it was fun. I'm really interested in things like this. So.
And guys, especially to you, like to everybody, but especially to all of my, usual main people, my subscribers and stuff. I hope you guys, if you do struggle with anything, you really, really, whether it's through this video or not, are able to find the good things in life, and that you're able to look at things from a positive perspective. Yep. And I hope it helps you tremendously in your lives.
Try the exercises.
Yeah. And
go talk to a good friend.
Yeah.
If you're really in need, go talk to a counselor.
Check out the book. Go to a counselor. Talk to somebody online. Just always try to see if you can mingle with somebody. And
somebody who's a good support.
Yeah, there's got to be somebody you can just kind of vent stuff to. That always helps too. Venting is a good thing. So, but anyway, All right, guys. I think we're out of here. Thanks again, guys, for checking out the video. I appreciate it. If you haven't seen my channel before, I appreciate a like or subscribing. And we will see you guys next time.
Bye.
Peace.